I'm Roy Lee Lindsay with the North Carolina Pork Council, and I want everyone to remember, bacon makes everything better.
Quarterfinal Thursday in the 2024 ACC tournament from Washington, D.C. I'm Mike Waddell, back at North Carolina Sports Network Central. David Glenn, you're in D.C., and what a quadruple header for the Atlantic Coast Conference. Two of the higher seeds win, and two big upsets there in the district. And it started off with North Carolina, a big runaway roll of the Noles. Final score 92-67. This one was all Carolina, and the ACC Player of the Year, R.J. Davis.
Carolina can just beat you in so many ways. Jameer Watkins of Florida State had 30-plus points in the Seminoles' victory over Virginia Tech to advance to today's game. And between Harris and Ingram, one of the better defenders in the ACC of the Tar Heels, and sometimes even Jalen Withers off the bench, those are long, athletic, tough guys that Jameer Watkins had to deal with after his 30-plus point game. And he went 3 for 11 from the field. He had 12 points. He had to earn all 12 of those points. So the Heels can beat you with defense in a way that most recent Carolina teams have not been able to beat you with defense. But as you said, it was a team effort. I mean, it was Player of the Year R.J. Davis with 18 points. It was Armando Bacot with 14 points and 10 rebounds. And he didn't even play his usual number of minutes because the Heels were up by so much. Armando's numbers could have been bigger. Most Florida State teams we've seen over the years, Mike, under Leonard Hamilton, they'd have usually not one, not two, but like 3 7'2" guys rotating. And we all know athletic guys with length can bother Armando Bacot, who's not great at jumping over the phone book, if you will, right? Well, this Florida State team is not built that way. And Armando took advantage. He could have had 20 and 16 if he had played his regular minutes. This is not a vintage Florida State team. The Heels exploited a defense that's not as good as most of Leonard Hamilton's teams of the past. But I thought Harrison Ingram was great on defense, unselfish offensively, dominant on the boards. Cormac Ryan continued his hot shooting, hitting 3 out of 4 threes. Seth Trimble is becoming more and more one of the most valuable sixth men in this league. There are coaches in this tournament who are afraid to go to their sixth and seventh man. Hubert Davis is not that guy. He believes in Seth Trimble defensively always, and Seth is even gaining confidence offensively. Jalen Withers is a pretty good seventh man for the Tar Heels. Jalen Washington is a pretty good eighth man for the Tar Heels. I'm not sure there's another coach that has confidence in his top 8 the way the Tar Heels do right now. And some of the teams that don't have confidence even beyond their starting 5, including Duke, were sent home today, and we'll get to that matchup a little bit later. But the Heels got a bunch of fast break points, which they haven't always done this season. They got a lot of paint points, which they haven't always done this season. It was a team effort. They were dominant. And they, of course, look like the best team in this league while going 17-3 in the regular season. They look like the best team in this league again here through 3 days of the ACC tournament.
Tar Heels close out on a 31-14 run. That's patented North Carolina basketball, and they go 14 deep in this game. And when you look at that, when you're able to get rest over a multi-day event like this, they're going to have to win games in 3 consecutive days. That might be the most valuable currency for head coach Hubert Davis, who a year ago was really criticized for not using his bench. He has really developed more of that pattern as this 2023-24 season has worn on.
Yeah, when you're up 16 at the half, that gives you coaching flexibility to use your bench and then at the end empty your bench, right? Nobody played more than 29 minutes for the Tar Heels. And, of course, their job to begin with, 3 games in 3 days, is different than the college basketball player's typical schedule, obviously. But at least the Heels aren't trying to win 5 games in 5 days the way NC State is trying to do. That's an even greater strain on even these amazingly athletic young men who are incredibly well conditioned. So the Tar Heels not only got the victory that all of us predicted that they would get, but they got it in style so that they are locked and loaded for what is a very challenging Pitt team tomorrow here in D.C.
And let's talk about how the Panthers and head coach
Jeff and by the way, Mike, I should say today here in D.C. because of when we're recording this. This has been a 14, 16-hour day. Let's see. Yeah, something like that. I'm losing. I hope I'm coherent the rest of our breakdown here because it is already Friday in D.C. as you and I are having this conversation. So I'm sure I'll be plenty rested by 7 p.m. this evening as we look forward to 2 great semifinal matchups. But obviously there's a lot to discuss just in the quarterfinals.
Let's talk about that Pitt win over Wake Forest. 81-69. This game really not close for the majority, even though the Deacons did make a spirited run late in the second half. Their decline continues, and it's really shocking because Steve Forbes' bunch is now clearly on the bubble to make the NCAA tournament, and Jeff Capel's Panthers march on to the semifinals where they'll meet a North Carolina team that they've beaten 5 out of the last 7 times, but this one really was a gritty effort by Pitt.
Yeah, and both Jeff Capel of Pitt and Steve Forbes of Wake Forest, you probably heard some of my questions in the post-game press conference representing the North Carolina Sports Network with pride, of course. They both kind of lobbied that, in their opinion, a little bit of a biased one, there were 2 NCAA tournament caliber teams going head-to-head as Pitt beat Wake Forest. I think that argument is going to fall on deaf ears. We know that Wake has 5 pretty good wins, maybe 5 wins over teams that are going to make the NCAA tournament, but all of those were in Winston-Salem. The Deacs accomplished nothing away from home this year, and I mean nothing. They didn't win the big game here. They didn't win any road games, and I love the job Steve Forbes has done. Hunter Salas is one of the best players in this league. The Deacs starting 5 to me looks like an NCAA tournament caliber starting 5. But the NCAA selection committee knows you don't play home games in the postseason, right? And the Deacs simply never proved themselves away from home. They were incredibly hard to beat at Joel Coliseum. They just often looked like 2 different teams when they were home versus a neutral court or a true road game. Hunter Salas only had 3 points in the first half. So you got to give Pitt's defense a lot of credit for that. Hunter did have a good second half, but, Pitt built its 12-point lead in the first half when they limited the Deacs to 26 points. That's an offensively explosive Wake team that scored only 26 in the first half. Down 12 at the half, they ended up losing by 12. So there was your game, and that's a credit to Jeff Capel and his game plan. They kept the ball out of Hunter Salas's hands. There was help defense when the freshman, Bub Carrington, often guarded Hunter Salas. That's a heck of a defensive assignment to ask of he is your star freshman, but he did his best to limit Hunter Salas, and I think Pitt was the tougher team. They got a lot of the 50-50 balls. They were first to the floor. They won the battle of the boards by just a little bit. Blake Hinson earned his first-team All-ACC status with some of his sharp shooting from the perimeter. But those 2 young guards for Pitt, they're growing up quickly, man. They're a lot better here in March than they were in November or December. Jalen Lowe now starts next to Bub Carrington. Those 2 guys are both true freshmen for the Panthers. And, oh, by the way, Ishmael Leggett comes off the bench, as he usually does, for 30 points, 8 rebounds, and 5 steals. ACC fans may not recall he was the best player for Rhode Island last year. Now, Rhode Island was not a good team. Jeff Capel saw a great player on a bad team and picked him up in the portal. And Ishmael Leggett, man, he and Blake Hinson are probably a combined 50 years old. I mean, they've been around the block. They've played a lot of basketball. They're not going to be intimidated by the intense crowds that we saw at times today. It was a a team effort. Jeff Capel loves his top 7. And you might have heard me say before the tournament, I thought there were 3 teams that could win this event. Carolina obviously is one of them. Duke, I thought, was one of them, and we'll get to that in a little bit. I thought Pitt was the other one. And the Pitt Panthers have never won an ACC tournament. Obviously, Duke and Carolina have plenty to their credit over the years. When a coach loves his top 7 and those freshmen are better than they were a couple months ago, I think that's a dangerous Panthers team that is waiting for the Tar Heels later today.
We'll talk about the Tar Heels and the Panthers a little bit later. Let's get to that first game of the evening session, NC State and Duke. And really from the get-go, after a really rough start by both teams in the opening 5 or 6 minutes, NC State just kept on Duke. They kept expanding the lead, and you kept waiting. When is Duke going to come back? When is Duke going to make a run? But they never did. And even in the postgame, John Shire, in the wake of this 74-69 Blue Devil loss to NC State, said his team just never showed that fire. Jason Williams on the ESPN telecast tonight saying he was disappointed that none of the body language reflected that there was any sense of urgency by the Blue Devils, but you got to give some credit to NC State. Yeah. I mean, they just against all odds and just keep on winning. And that's got to give a lot of confidence to that group going into the game tomorrow night. But let's talk about this again. NC State, they did everything they could. You and I texting back and forth during the game to Wolfpack this win away. Missing 5 free throws, missing layups, missing dunks, getting a technical foul, but they finally eked this one out over the Blue Devils, and that was just another great classic ACC tournament quarterfinal game.
There were moments late, Mike, where I wondered if some of those Wolfpack errors you mentioned was going to mean this translated into the ultimate hashtag NC State stuff, where you're about to beat Duke, but you miss a dunk and get a technical foul. I mean, it was trending in a really weird direction there, and then they got it together. And I like the way you framed this because I think it's important to start with giving State credit. We can dissect what went wrong for Duke, and there was plenty that went wrong for Duke. I got to ask John Shire a question after the game, and you could tell he was highly displeased. That's a guy who's been an ACC tournament MVP. That's a guy who played guard for the Duke Blue Devils, and he watched his Duke guards wilt against NC State today. We'll get to that in a second. But as you said, let's give credit to the Wolfpack first. Kevin Keats, it took him a long time to find his preferred lineup this season, but when Mohamed Diarra gets a ton of minutes at forward, which he got 37 minutes today, that's a guy that if you look at what he was getting earlier this season, there were times he got 22 minutes, 24 minutes. He's obviously central to the equation now. And even though Kyle Filipowski had a really good game for Duke and Diarra was asked to guard one of the hardest to guard guys in this league, Diarra did a lot of things well, 14 points, 16 rebounds, 4 blocked shots. That was the best of Mohamed Diarra, and he's been rewarded with increased playing time lately, including a starting assignment. It took a long time for Michael O'Connell, the point guard, to be recognized as the guy who makes the Wolfpack offense flow more smoothly. He's not an overwhelming athlete. He does not have overwhelming statistics. But I thought for most of the season when he was in the game, and there were plenty of games where the Wolfpack was so choppy offensively that you just wondered, it was just like an engine that needed an oil change. And Michael O'Connell was kind of the human oil change. He doesn't always have huge numbers himself. He played 35 minutes today. Again, like Diarra, if you look at other box scores from the Wolfpack this year, there were 20-minute games, not 35-minute games sometimes for Michael O'Connell. He had 12 points. He had 4 assists. He had no turnovers in 35 minutes against Duke. No turnovers as the point guard. And he hit both of the 3-point attempts that he took. That is unselfish, as Coach Keats said, high basketball IQ basketball. And, of course, he was a contributor. But he makes people around him better. And the Wolfpack got the best of Diarra, the best of O'Connell, DJ Horn coming off the bench again since that injury he had not long ago, 18 points, and obviously an all-ACC player who lived up to that hype again today against the Blue Devils. So I underline how you started this conversation. Let's give the Wolfpack credit. They were smacked by this Duke team 10 days ago on the Wolfpack's home court. You've got to have some fiber to beat the same team that fed you your hat on your own court 10 days ago. We all saw that happen. It was all Duke, especially in the second half at PNC Arena. It's not easy to shake that off and then head to the ACC tournament where everybody's talking about Pitt and Wake and UVA and even Syracuse. With that backdrop, and most of the Wolfpack conversation being, is Kevin Keatts going to get year 8 in Raleigh? That's a lot of negativity. And they came here, they won their first game, they won their second game, and now they've won their third game. So credit to the Wolfpack. And then John Shire brought it up, man. He sometimes wears his emotions on his sleeve. He took forever to get to the post-game press conference. I mean, I've been at this for 37 years. I know when the coaches are supposed to show up. And it was a long, long wait before the Duke coach, and he brought the two guys who played well. As he was at the podium, Mike, I forget if it was my question or somebody else's, but he pointed to the guys next to him, which were Filipowski, 28 points and 14 rebounds. Mark Mitchell, his other big guy, 18 points and 8 rebounds. There was nothing wrong with what those two guys did for Duke today. They played winning basketball. So he motioned to the two guys to his left and complimented their competitive fire and said, we just didn't have that. We, as a team, Duke, did not have that collectively the way Mitchell and Filipowski had it individually. And that was the story of the game. Jared McCain had a weird freak accident during pregame warmups where he bumps heads with his own teammate and ends up with stitches. Can you imagine having to be numbed and had this? It wasn't just a Band-Aid. It was a thick thing that almost looked like it would affect his vision and his balance and his timing. I mean, I wouldn't want to try to play that way. So McCain wasn't himself, as Shire recognized from the podium. Jeremy Roach is a senior who has gone from a disappointing senior night against the Tar Heels to laying an egg right after that against NC State today, where Jeremy Roach was, to me, one of the 10 best players in the ACC this season. It's really unusual to see your senior guard kind of fall by the wayside when you need him most. And Tyrese Proctor was 4 for 16 from the field. I mean, those three Duke guards on a team where, remember, the freshman Caleb Foster, who's kind of Duke's sixth man, has been injured, so he's not available right now. Bench scoring today, Mike, was Wolfpack 21, Duke 0. And it's hard, even if you like your starting five, it's hard to win with only 5 guys. Duke likes its starting 5 when they're playing the right way. But 3 of the starting 5, the entire backcourt, just didn't really show up. And John Shire, former guard, former ACC tournament MVP, man, he was seething. He was spitting words out through his teeth. He was so fired up. And he said they're going to go back to the drawing board and figure things out for the NCAA tournament. Man, it's a bad sign if you're still trying to figure things out on March 15th.
Duke probably playing themselves out of the trip to the Queen City with this loss. Carolina and Tennessee looking like they could be headed to Charlotte. But I want to go back just for a second and give more kudos to NC State and head coach Kevin Keatts. He made a big strategic decision to put Diarra on Filipowski, give up some height, put DJ Burns back into the paint, and almost dare Mitchell to shoot. Now, I went to Cameron Indoor Stadium for the Duke-Carolina game, but also for the Duke-Arizona game. Sat courtside for both. But I sat behind Mitchell in pregame and again at halftime where he shot brick after brick after brick, shooting under 25% for the year behind 3. Now, he made some shots tonight, and you mentioned that he came through with some points. But those were points that Keatts strategically said, go ahead and take them because you're going to miss more than you make. Tonight, Kevin Keatts truly outcoached John Shire. Kevin Keatts got the most out of his team And Shire seems to be losing his team, where Filipowski, ever since the thing went down at Wake and, he comes back, like he's rising like Lazarus from the dead to come back in the next game, really not showing any ill effects. He seems almost like he's very distant from his teammates. This is not a cohesive Duke team, while NC State and Diarra, again, fasting from sunup to sundown. He's over there chawing down on energy bars and whatever they could get in him. I think it's a big advantage for NC State having to, wait until the last game tomorrow night, because now Diarra can get some food in and get some rest. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll talk about that in the wrap. But then in the nightcap tonight, we get bonus basketball. That's why we're talking to you on a Friday morning. You're probably watching this as you get up. We're doing it right after midnight. David's not turned into a pumpkin yet there in the district. But Boston College, trying to be the third consecutive lower seed to win over the higher seed, cannot get past the overtime bunch from the lawn there, as Virginia comes through with the win in overtime. And they're just an ugly team to watch, but maybe trying to channel some of that 1976 Landover magic from Wally Walker and Terry Holland and the whole bunch right there, trying to will themselves further into this tournament. But Virginia gets the win. This one really was, kind of a stinker, but in the overtime, Virginia started to play Virginia basketball, and they started to make some shots.
Yeah, it's a credit to Tony Bennett and the Cavaliers, right? They are not pretty offensively this season. They are nothing like the best Tony Bennett teams we've seen over the years, because they have such a hard time finding buckets on most nights. But their cornerstone hasn't changed. They play some of the best defense in the entire country. And as this game moved along, Quentin Post is an all-ACC caliber player for Boston College, and he got his 23 points. But gradually, the Cavaliers just kind of squeezed the oxygen out of the other Boston College players, to the point that there wasn't much confidence that BC was going to get big buckets down the stretch or in that overtime. So Virginia's defense comes through again as usual, and on a night where Reese Beekman did not shoot very well, the Cavaliers all-ACC player was only 4 for 17 from the field and had 11 points, but he also had 11 assists. And to have 11 assists, that means some of your buddies had to make some buckets. On this night, last night technically as we speak, they got enough of those other buckets. There have been games this year. Remember, all the Cavaliers' losses have been by double digits on nights where they were just completely offensively inept. They're among the best in the nation defensively. They're not even in the top barely 200 offensively. And Jake Groves stepped up today. Some nights it's Isaac McNeely. He didn't shoot very well, although he made some free throws that really mattered late. Jake Groves steps up and hits 3 threes, 15 points. Tane Murray, who doesn't always play a lot, hit 5 of 6 from the field and had 11 points. The way Virginia plays, I know 11 points doesn't sound like a lot, but the way Virginia plays, if you get 15 from Groves and 11 from Murray on a night like this, that's going to be enough. So it's 66-60, Virginia over Boston College in overtime. The Cavs don't play pretty basketball. They're going to need that secondary scoring if they're going to continue to advance. I don't think this is an ACC championship caliber UVA team, but here they are, one of the last 4 still standing.
Michael Berard, Managing Director Investments with the Founders Group at Stifel, works with a select group of high net worth individuals and institutions to develop and implement investment plans tailored to their specific objectives and risk tolerances. If you are interested in highly personalized, well-researched guidance and outstanding personal service, you can contact Michael at 984-364-2002. That's 984-364-2002. Stifel Nicholas & Company Incorporated, member SIPC and NYSE.
Pitt, Carolina only played one time this year. They'll play in the first semifinal later today. 7 o'clock game there in Washington, D.C. Carolina won by 13 in that first game. How much can you take from that game until from early January to right now in mid-March? Because Pitt truly, under Coach Capel, is a different team than they were right after New Year's.
I think you're right about that. I mean, you can take away some things. I would argue that Carolina's better than it was when it beat Pitt in that game, but Pitt is better than it was. I mentioned earlier Jalen Lowe had often limited minutes as a freshman guard early this season. He's now starting alongside his freshman guard teammate Bub Carrington. So that's a significant change for the Panthers compared to when they played the Tar Heels during the regular season. The Heels have Cormac Ryan hitting on all cylinders now. That was not the case. But Armando Bacot had 16 points, 10 rebounds, and 3 blocks in that win over the Panthers during the regular season. You know, Bacot had that famous quote, "The ACC runs through me this year." That was one of the games where he showed that the ACC sometimes does run through him, because Pitt has a couple of big guys with length and athleticism that can sometimes bother Armando, but Bacot came through in that Carolina victory. R.J. Davis, player of the year, of course, 15 points, 4 assists in that first game. Seth Trimble had 10 points and 6 rebounds off the bench in that Pitt game during the regular season, and he's playing at maximum confidence for Hubert Davis right now. If you remember, Mike, Blake Hinson, the first-team All-ACC guy for Pitt, shot horribly in that game. And I don't recall off the top of my head who was guarding him most of the time. We know Harrison Ingram has been a Swiss Army knife defender. I imagine I'd have to go back and look, but I'm pretty sure 6'7" Harrison Ingram was, Blake Hinson's a thick, big, basically a 6'7" thick, old forward who can truly make three-pointers from the logo. Like, he can flat out put the biscuit in the basket from distance, but he's a little bit streaky. So whereas he's a good percentage shooter, I remember in that game against the Tar Heels, he was like 2 for 11 or something truly horrific. He just didn't get going. Now, again, that's in part because Carolina's playing some of the best defense we've seen Carolina play in the last 20 years. So we'll see if that theme continues tomorrow. But it's a more dangerous Pitt team than the Heels beat previously, going against, I'd argue, an improved Carolina team. So how does that shake out? We'll see. Pitt still has the mindset that it has to fight for an NCAA tournament bid. I know they beat Wake, and that's a nice step in the right direction, but I don't think Pitt has so many quality wins that it can assume it's an NCAA at-large bid if the Panthers lose to the Tar Heels. So you might as well treat it as win and you're in, and lose and you're biting your fingernails and hoping the NCAA selection committee gives you the benefit of the doubt. So that's going to be a whopper of an opening game later today, as we say, with the team that's won the second most ACC titles of all time, Carolina, with 18 ACC championships, going against the only team still standing that has never won the ACC tournament. The Pitt Panthers, of course, haven't been members of the league for too long, but Carolina has 18 titles, NC State has 10 titles, Virginia has 3 titles, and the Panthers are seeking their first. I can tell you, as a guy who has seen, Florida State won their first ACC title when I was there, and it's a special thing for a school. Notre Dame won its first ACC title, and I was there. The Miami Hurricanes won. We can all remember most of these examples. Could Pitt be that latest example, finally kicking the door down? They made the NCAA tournament, of course, under Jeff Capel a year ago, and they kicked that door down. They had not previously been to the big dance under Coach Capel. So he needed that breakthrough last year. He got it. And now he's looking for an even bigger breakthrough, either the ACC title or, just enough, showing just enough to earn that at-large bid if it comes to that on Selection Sunday.
If you're Jeff Capel, you give the scout of the Tar Heels to the former Tar Heel, his brother Jason, sitting right to his side there on the bench. And you've got to look at what Clemson did. You got to look at what Georgia Tech did, because North Carolina can be playing at the zenith one day and could go all the way down to the abyss, the Algonquin abyss, the next game. They have to get that confidence. They have to keep that energy up. What do you do if you're Pitt to try to throw Carolina off their rhythm early on and maybe get in the Tar Heels' head a bit?
I think you run them off the 3-point line. That's one thing. The Heels are almost unbeatable when Cormac Ryan's hitting threes, Harrison Ingram's hitting threes, R.J. Davis is hitting threes, and sometimes even others. So you want to force them to try to go more 2+2+2. And, of course, Carolina has a similar philosophy. How many times do you or I hear over the years, Dean Smith's a Hall of Fame coach, but, man, the way he coaches, he encourages his defenders to pack in just a little bit, give that 3-point, dare that 3-point shooter a little bit. Hubert doesn't look at it. He doesn't play defense that way. One of the reasons Carolina is the most defensively efficient team in the ACC this season is because of how Hubert Davis teaches defense. And the Heels are only giving up about 30% 3-point shooting in conference play this year. That's an amazingly impressive number. I think Jeff Capel's going to take a page out of the Hubert Davis playbook, if you will, and just try to run the Heels off the 3-point line. Make Cormac Ryan dribble. Make R.J. Davis at only 6 feet tall. Try to hit those floaters or challenge the trees near the rim rather than launching another relatively open 3-point shot. We'll see if that tactic works, but I'll be surprised if we don't see both teams trying to force the other to go 2+2, because when either gets on a roll from 3-point land, you watch who's in Blake Hinson's grill when he's 23 feet from the basket. They're going to force that guy to put the ball on the ground. Jeff Capel has, Cormac Ryan and others in mind with a similar defensive approach.
In sports, we talk a lot about impact players who make a positive difference. When it comes to our state's economy, the North Carolina pork industry is a true MVP. Each year, the pork industry plays an important role in supporting rural communities across our state. It contributes more than $10 billion a year to the North Carolina economy and supports more than 44,000 jobs. Learn more about their positive impact at ncpork.org. The North Carolina Pork Council, the foundational partner of the North Carolina Sports Network.
NC State, Virginia in the second semifinal later tonight, a little bit after 9:30. The two teams split their games during the regular season. NC State's going to get out and try to run. They're going to try to play physical inside. Virginia, kind of like what you just talked about with North Carolina, when they are at their best, they're making shots from the outside, probably going a little bit better than 5 of 14 at the free throw line as well. So that really is a contrast of styles right now. If you're Kevin Keats, if you're the Wolfpack, you got nothing to lose. I mean, you might as well just take a run at it and see what goes. And, hey, the last time the Wolfpack won an ACC title was back in 1987. That was at the Omni in Atlanta. So maybe being out of Greensboro or out of Charlotte is all the difference that the Wolfpack needs to maybe bring home some trophy or at least get to that championship game this year in D.C.
And keep in mind, Mike, the Wolfpack beat Virginia by 16 during the regular season, and the game they lost to UVA was in overtime. So they've played the Cavaliers pretty well this season. That should give them some confidence on the one hand. On the other hand, the Wolfpack will be playing its fourth game in 4 days. That's, even for these elite athletes, that's not something that they're all that accustomed to. And although Virginia plays a slow pace, it's important for everybody to remember that Virginia makes you run in a different way. They use most of the 30 seconds on the shot clock most of the time. And you do a lot of running defensively while guarding for that full 20, 25 plus seconds. So the pace that UVA is sometimes famous or infamous for sometimes can lead to a little rest here or there, but the way the Cavaliers force you to exhaust yourself on defense, it'll be interesting to see if fatigue becomes a factor for the Wolfpack. But they have to feel good about how they played UVA twice this season. It was State finishing strong even in the game that they lost to UVA in overtime. They were down big and made it a great game in the second half, and they made Virginia kind of revisit some of those offensive struggles that the Cavaliers have had all season long. It'll be interesting to see. The Wolfpack smells something special right now, and the energy around that group, and discovering the Diarra factor, discovering the O'Connell factor, they just feel good about who they are right now. It's almost like it took 4 months for them to figure out what their best rotation is, what their best roles are. But I guess what's the old saying? Better late than never, right? Because to me, UVA NC State is a coin flip. And who would have thought that the Wolfpack would be a coin flip away from playing in the ACC title game this year?
And DJ Burns is just priceless. Some of his comments after the game, he's saying, what was it like to hear the crowd behind you? He said, they weren't cheering for us. They were cheering for Duke to lose. And that's the difference. But that's the thing that you and I, we met DJ back at ACC Operation Basketball in Charlotte back in October. He was a ball of joy then. He is an absolute fantastic. He reminds me of when he gives interviews like that. He reminds me of Muhammad Ali talking to Howard Cosell, and he says, champ, you're being extremely truculent. He says, I don't know what it means, but if that means it's good, I'm that. He's just a no bullshit kind of guy, and he just gets it done, and you just want to root for him. I mean, you want to root for the Pack. Now, there are a lot of Wolfpack fans, and I was with some earlier today that are saying, oh, we're just going to go ahead and get beat tonight, and then we can get on to a new coach. And these people, they're really struggling within themselves because on one hand, they're excited as all get out that their team's winning. On the other hand, they're saying, hey, we want to change. So that's where you just got to root for these guys. And I've even seen one of our favorite clips. It's of Coach V and our buddy Bob Holliday, another ACC tournament veteran, when Bob had his red bow tie on, and Jimmy B's going da na 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 na. I mean it's infectious. So obviously we have Pitt and Carolina in the first game, and then 2 ACC long-timers in NC State and Virginia. Hey, the ACC old guard has 3 out of 4. That's not bad. Too bad Wake couldn't get it done, but man, we got to get you out of here because you got to go get some Chinese food and hang out with some of the guys tonight before making your way back to the arena tomorrow, maybe about 6 o'clock.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm glad you brought up rooting for the Wolfpack because in case folks are wondering, they're sweeping the floors here at Capital One Arena. They haven't thrown me out yet, but there's not a whole lot of people here. You can see the empty seats behind me. I can see some folks still active on the ACC network and or ESPN down there, but there might not be more than 6 or 8 people in this entire vicinity right now. But you brought up the phrase "root for the Pack," and I just want to make one quick point. By the way, the hospitality suite, the media hospitality suite, is a long-time tradition. And you mentioned this is my 37th ACC tournament. I remember being one of the youngest guys at the hospitality suite, where they were carding me to make sure I was allowed to get the free beer, right? So that's how long I've been doing this. I'm probably in the 80th percentile age-wise now. It doesn't bother me, but the hospitality suite is open all the way till 2 o'clock, so that's one reason to get me out of here. We're also in D.C., so I got to get a shuttle. They run every 30 minutes, so I'm looking at the clock to make sure that I get out of here by 1 a.m. But I think we started by saying this building was mostly full, right? So it's DC. I won't say that it was just jam-packed, but the evening session, I think more people, get off work or travel during the day. The evening session was jam-packed, but Carolina was incredibly well represented early yesterday afternoon, technically, right? I keep getting that wrong. And you'd expect that, right? There's an incredible optimism. The Heels have only won 1 ACC title since 2008. And that Carolina fan base feels the optimism and wants to be a part of it and made the trip to D.C., right? And they'll show up again for these semifinals, of course. UVA is the only ACC school located, Mike, within 240 miles of where I am right now. So the Cavaliers are the 3 seed. The Cavaliers, Charlottesville's not crazy far from here. UVA has a lot of alums in the D.C. area, as many ACC schools do. So you knew the Cavs would be well represented, and they were last night, and they will be again in the semifinals. NC State is curious to me because I have not seen a lot of Wolfpack fans here percentage-wise this week. And, of course, they're only a 10 seed, and there was not that optimism around the Wolfpack as this tournament started, the way there was optimism around the Heels, or there can be optimism around a 3 seed like UVA, or even, a Pitt team that is a 4 seed is trying to win the first ACC title in school history. And that fan base probably feels that that's more possible this year than in any other year that the Panthers have been a member of the ACC. So it's a curiosity to me. We all know that the Wolfpack is a large, loud, loyal, passionate, knowledgeable fan base. There's no doubt about it. This week, to this point, they have not been here in large numbers. I've even gone and seen some of my Wolfpack friends, and the ones that I walk up into the stands to say hi to, they're surrounded by by people wearing other school colors. So there have been some Wolfpack fans here this week, but they have not been represented in the same volume as Duke was in a losing effort yesterday, or Carolina has been, or UVA has been in winning efforts. I'll be fascinated now that the Wolfpack is in the semifinals, and, folks have a little advance notice, right? You just have to get to D.C. by Friday at 7 o'clock. I'll be intrigued to see how well represented Wolfpack Nation is once that game rolls around later today, as I'm starting to get that right. I hope they're well represented because this has become an easier team to root for. They're playing unselfishly. They're embracing their roles. They seem to care a little less about who gets what on a given night. Those are all positive vibes, man. And a lot of people think that they're playing for Kevin Keats's job, whether they think that way or they believe that. That's another layer of desperation. Just like trying to get to the NCAA tournament is one more layer of desperation for the Wolfpack. It's been a fun story to watch through 3 Wolfpack victories, and we all know they're capable of beating UVA. This is not some wish upon a star super Cinderella story, right? At this point, we've seen what they did in 3 wins. We know UVA is not vintage UVA. It is absolutely not an insurmountable object as they take on the Cavaliers. So who knows, man? We could end up with a North Carolina NC State final, or we could end up with 2 out-of-state teams playing to cut down the nets. It's going to be a heck of a Friday night semifinals, and I'm glad I'm here representing the North Carolina Sports Network for it.
Hey, I think there will be a lot of Tar Heel fans cheering for the Wolfpack because, trying to play all those games in a row, that certainly plays to the Tar Heels' advantage, but we do have it. The Final 4 in the ACC now: Pitt, North Carolina, NC State, and Virginia. For David Glenn, I'm Mike Waddell. Our ACC tournament coverage is brought to you by the North Carolina Port Council, the foundational partner of the North Carolina Sports Network. We'll be back Friday night after the 2 semifinals to see if North Carolina can make their 36th final out of 71 tournaments. That's 51% of the time. You know what that means? It doesn't matter if it's in Atlanta or Tampa or Brooklyn or D.C. or Greensboro or Charlotte. Winners win. As Appalachian State AD Doug Gillen is known to say, winners always win. And right now, the 4 teams that have won in D.C. are really shining at the right time of the season. David, go have some fun there in the district and catch that shuttle, okay?
Thanks, Mike. I hope folks will check out our coverage at ncsportsnetwork.com. Follow us on Twitter at the NCSportsNet. Also, my handle is at David Glenn Show. I've been trying to just pound some intriguing, I hope, and interesting tidbits, ACC tournament and otherwise. But great to see you from D.C., and we'll be back at it for the semifinals a little bit later today as I speak to you on this very, 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 very early Friday morning.